District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. A happy St. Patrick's Day to those of you who observe. I think in the context of conservation, we could make it an occasion for spending time in green spaces. That's what we'll make of it. But yesterday, I celebrated a birthday. Thank you so much to those of you who sent me nice birthday wishes. It was very sweet. 34 years old. Gosh, I'm getting old. Just kidding. I still feel very young at heart. But it's always interesting celebrating another birthday, especially in such a crazy news cycle, which is why I have two great topics for you today to break down. One being a quick recap of my first ever bear den study. I have talked about bear den studies for years. Now I finally did one. Going to go into detail. And we're going to talk about this excellent deregulatory effort from EPA. We're going to call it EPA spring cleaning. That was much needed for many, many years. So really pleased to see what Administrator Zeldin is doing. So you guys are getting both bear den studies and my take on this EPA deregulatory effort. So you may have seen on social media that I was caressing and holding adorable black bear cubs. Joining the elite club of bear cub cuddlers is a high honor. I'm glad I got the opportunity to do it. It's not open to the public, unfortunately, and maybe for the better, because a bear den study is a very intimate type of affair. You are with biologists, bear biologists, general wildlife biologists. We also had, and I was doing this in concert with the National Shooting Sports Foundation, who graciously invited me for 5 years. We were trying to make it work, and I'm grateful to Mark Oliva for making this a reality. It was so much fun. It was done in concert with the Maryland DNR, Department of Natural Resources. I'm not going to detail where we went because of privacy concerns and just so people do not get any ideas of trying to tackle and cuddle with bear cubs themselves. I'll just say it was in Maryland, in a very rural part of Maryland, for context. But Maryland DNR graciously invited a couple us to join them. And this also occurs all across the country, namely in Connecticut, Massachusetts. I've heard of Arkansas doing it. Michigan also has bear den studies. A couple states have bear den studies where some people like myself, whether they're in media, they're stakeholders, people from firearms manufacturing organizations, companies, the like conservation stakeholders in general, folks like us typically get invited to see where monies from conservation, particularly excise taxes collected on guns and ammunition. This is through the Partner with a Payer program from the Fish and Wildlife Services Wildlife and Fish Restoration Project. I'm going to write extensively about this later this week, but I want to preview it for you here what this is. We've talked about this at length. Mark has mentioned this. Some other firearms industry representatives have talked about this program. But this program, a portion of this from the federal monies, I believe in the last year, it's almost $30 billion since 1937. But in the last few years, over $1 billion have been collected from Pittman-Robertson dollars, largely from shooting sports activities, hunting licenses, and the like. And a portion of that goes to these bear den studies, which is why I got to be a bear cuddler. So there's a greater purpose and a connection. It wasn't just me going to fraternize and play with little bear cubs, which was fantastic. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but it wasn't the first time I've actually interacted with bear cubs in a safe, comfortable environment. And again, you don't approach bear cubs, don't approach mother bears. They're very territorial. The last time I had such an immersive experience very safely was at Yellowstone Bear World in Idaho. And I got to bottle feed, I think, yearling bear cubs. Maybe they were 6 months old. Very safe, like 30 seconds worth. This is a place that rehabs abandoned bears. All legit. nothing problematic. But this was even more interesting because you're holding 5 to 6 week old bear cubs, black bear cubs, and they are so cute. It's like handling babies or even puppies. And even the claws, they look very dangerous. I did not get scratched or anything. These bears were very chill. Again, they're 5 to 6 weeks old, very young, very attached to mama. And the reason why they deputize bear cuddlers or have people do bear cuddling, so to speak, is when the bear biologists and biologists are examining the mother, the health of the mother and her cubs. This sow is a term for a female bear. So she's been monitored by Maryland DNR, I think since 2018. She's been in their program. She has had several litters before, I think with 4 cubs twice before, if I remember correctly from the notes I took. And this litter that we all handled were triplets. There were 2 boys and a girl. Mother is fully tranquilized. She has consciousness, but of course, it's like anesthesia, essentially what they're doing. So she did not wake up. She was fully fine. This is what biologists do all the time. This is nothing out of the ordinary when they're checking the health of animals, such as in Maryland, where the bear numbers are far and few between compared to Virginia. I think we have 20,000 bears here in Virginia. Maryland's population is a few thousand, so it's a fraction. So they monitor the bear species very attentively, which is why they do these bear studies. So as mama gets checked, bear cuddlers such as us are holding the bears, taking a look at them, cuddling with them. And after the mother is fully checked, examined, gets a clean bill of health, the bear cubs then get monitored and examined too. So we hold them, I guess, to make them feel at ease before they have ear tags installed on them and then microchips implanted. So you'll see in some forthcoming coverage, especially a video overview of this experience, I'm going to showcase this. It doesn't harm the bear. It's a little bit painful, but they have to do this to track these young bears. So they give them these ear tags that grow with them. As they grow pretty fast. Within a year to 2, they grow big. Some black bears, if you don't know, can even be as big as 800 pounds. But typically, I think a black bear in the mid-Atlantic I have seen is usually between 300, 400 pounds, maybe a little bit on the lighter side, but they were saying that they've even encountered bears that are in the 800-pound category, which is a rarity. That's not very frequent, but sometimes these guys get big. So I bet you in the future, some of these bear cubs might be really big, especially the boys. So they get the microchip implanted, they have the ear tags installed, and then they go back into the den with mom. I did not take any bear cubs home, as tempting as it is. Of course, I don't buy into the Disney propaganda of plucking wildlife from nature, especially young animals. You do not do that. That's like very much against any protocol and standards of and ethics even of hunting. You don't do that. You don't hunt them either. That's something I want to reiterate, that nobody hunts bear cubs. And I think the reason why they put a microchip and they also tag these bears is in the event that some lunatic poaches these young defenseless baby bears, they know who did it, what bear was taken unlawfully. Heaven forbid that happens. But they also do it not only because of the fear of poaching, but also to track the life of the bear. If they're problem bears, they know which one to identify. It's also if they're good bears, don't really have any human bear conflicts or interactions. So they use this for multiple purposes. And it's all done in the name of science, wildlife science. And having seen this for myself, I think it's such a great program. Again, a huge honor to do this and to become a bear cuddler. So much fun. As you can see on social media, I had a blast doing all this, especially before my birthday. Probably one of the best birthday presents or experience I've ever received. But you will find out more about Partner with a Payer, my experience in Maryland very soon. I'm going to have a full write-up at Town Hall, kind of tie this into Pittman-Robertson, the political sense of this. You'll see a video, and hopefully I'll have some more derivatives in some outdoor magazines I write for in the coming months. But there will be some immediate deliverables, I promise. But I wanted to share with you all my initial reading and thoughts into shadowing a bear den study. It's a lot of fun. If you get the opportunity and are invited by a wildlife agency or a firearms manufacturer stakeholder in partnership with DNR or Fish and Wildlife Service, which oversees all the wildlife agencies, do it. You will not regret it. You will love it. And it's a lot of fun. Very cute too. Those bear cubs, you can't resist. They're adorable. Now to the policy side, there is so much happening in energy and conservation policy. I'm not sure how to wrap my head around it because it's hard for even someone like me to track this. But I think the EPA deregulatory effort unveiled last week by Administrator Zeldin is something worth noting and expounding on. There were 31 actions taken. I won't list all of the actions taken for you. I'm just going to do kind of top of mind actions and read exactly what those are. So I think one of the biggest ones they've done, and Trump 1.0 did not challenge this, but the 2009 endangerment finding. This is like the holy grail of climate alarmism. And this standard was created under the Obama administration, to say and label basically carbon as a pollutant and other gases are harmful to the environment. Carbon is only 0.4% of the atmosphere, for context. So labeling carbon as a pollutant has explained why we've seen this proliferation of climate alarmism, all these crazy climate policies, climate dictates, these rules that have targeted car usage, power plants, reliable power plants, especially coal and natural gas. Why you've seen this overregulation of carbon, why you've seen ESG, why you've seen all these extreme measures which promise a great deal to combat so-called climate crisis, but they deliver very little for actually improving the environment. They're just very costly. They're extremely hard to enforce. So this endangerment finding, to me, underpinned a lot of these extreme policies, again, which promise to be very conservation friendly, but they're not. They're just very costly. The Green New Deal also is born out of this endangerment finding too, even if it's indirectly born out of it. But this was the impetus for a lot of the climate policies we've seen since the first Obama administration in 2009. And with Zeldin announcing that they're going to be reassessing that, I think that is extremely groundbreaking and important. And it doesn't mean it's going to lead to a despoiling of the environment. But if you attack the holy grail of this thinking, of this philosophy, that is pretty notable. Also, what he announced among the 30 plus actions taken, they're going to reassess measuring the social cost of carbon. Again, kind of tied to this endangerment finding. When you're tracking carbon and carbon emissions across your supply chain, this is what the Securities and Exchange Commission was wanting to do with their Scope 3 emissions rule, which was unenforceable, very foolhardy and ridiculous, and it would have imposed more costs and burdens onto businesses and institute a carbon tax, essentially. And what carbon taxes do, they discourage businesses here at home from producing anything that is so-called carbon intensive. So carbon intensive services and goods would be discouraged under carbon pricing, carbon taxes, and the like. And when you institute those types of restrictions, it's a punitive measure. It's not good. It claims it's going to lead to emissions being reduced. It doesn't. What it ultimately does is it places the burdens on the producers who then have to track this emissions, and then it detracts from them actually fulfilling their bottom line. And then ultimately, as they take on more costs, those costs get passed down to consumers. And if things go totally awry with this, knowing the reality of this type of policy, carbon taxes, carbon pricing, etc., then it ultimately drives these businesses to move their operations not only out of state, but out of the country. I think tracking carbon pricing is extremely distracting from environmentalism. It makes businesses and those who are affected by such take on things that are not germane to their mission statement, and it just makes things more costly and no impact or change to emissions, the environment, and the like. And it also invites a lot of cheating. You know, with ESG, I've talked about this at length. The people who try to get good ESG scores, they find shortcuts, they cheat, they overinflate their ESG score, they pretend they're saving the environment, and you find out that they just paid to have a really good ESG score without improving their supply chain or business repertoire. I'm also encouraged by the announcement that they want to repeal or really dismantle the Clean Power Plan 2.0 rule. As we approach an era of more electricity demand is going to spike about 9% in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe even more. And more people who are recognizing the ill of their ways of supporting net zero. When you have this go climate, full steam ahead, reduce fossil fuels significantly or entirely, achieve net zero by 2050. When you need reliable electricity, what sources are going to come to save the day? Nuclear energy is what everyone is talking about, rightfully so, because that could be seen as the future with how reliable, dispatchable, and actually good for the environment nuclear is. There's been a lot of misinformation about nuclear. You've heard me talk about this. I've had some guests talk about this. We'll have some more guests from the nuclear industry come talk about the importance of nuclear. But also part of the equation, you look at the distribution of electricity generation in the US. What other sources come to mind or are shown to comprise the bulk of electricity generation? Natural gas is about 43%. Coal is also about 16%. Nuclear is about 18%. Cumulatively, that is about 78% of electricity generation from those three sources. The Biden administration had a rule to shut down new natural gas plants and existing coal plants if they did not pledge to reduce their carbon emissions by 95% using carbon capture technology, something that has not been proven yet or scalable yet. There's a lot of uncertainty about it. I have skepticism about it myself. Conditioning the operation of plants that are reliable, functional, and producing electricity that powers most of the country, conditioning their existence on unproven carbon capture technology, the threat of that is shoddy policy making. And then what? You shut down those plants and replace it with what? Solar and wind, which only work 25 and 35% of the time of the year if you're lucky. Even net zero proponents are saying this is ridiculous. We cannot afford to do this to meet this growing demand from AI and just general overall increase in electricity usage that comes with AI and other needs too, because we're a first world civilization here in the United States and we need reliable energy through electricity and other means to power our lifestyles that we enjoy, the comfortable lifestyles that we enjoy here. So shutting down reliable power plants prematurely was very idiotic. Let's be blunt. So I like that they're revisiting this. The Waters of the United States rule, we've seen a volleying back and forth between this. Biden's rule was seen as an encroachment on property rights. They were basically deeming puddles, trickles, and little insignificant bodies of water as navigable bodies of water, which is asinine. Huge infringement on property rights. I've done a lot of writing on this. You want to learn more about it, I can send it your way. There's also, of course, the electric vehicle mandates or the tailpipe emission standards rule. And one of those, I believe for light and medium duty size cars to go into effect in 2027. Cost in terms of enforcement, the cost of this regulation was the most expensive of any regulation across any government agency, according to the American Action Forum. It was approximate to cost $870 billion. Overall, the EPA, in terms of the rules enacted under the Biden administration, was $1.3 trillion and 40,000 hours of paperwork. That is absurd. And what did any one of those regulations do? Did it lead to any decrease in emissions? Did it lead to any improvement of the environment? I would wager not. I did not see any improvement to the environment. I just saw that they made commerce more expensive, made the cost of compliance ridiculous, just virtue signaling, no improvement. They restricted choices. And when you pit people versus economic opportunities, they're less inclined to support the environment. They're less inclined to care about their natural surroundings. This is common sense. You don't need a study or some sort of factoids to tell you this. This is human nature. If someone is displaced from their livelihoods under the guise of protecting the environment, if you have regulations to stop energy infrastructure projects, which you build more energy projects here, especially reliable ones, coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear, it is going to be much better for the environment to produce it here at home with the regulations or standards we have here versus exporting that to third world countries which don't have the same environmental standards. And then you're shipping all that back here. Makes no sense cost-wise, environmentally, all that sort. But Administrator Zeldin is doing much needed spring cleaning. I think that's the wrap up I want to have with this. The big takeaway from this. The EPA, again, with how much they passed in regulations under the Biden administration, again, $1.3 trillion to enact EPA regulations, which had no measurable benefit to the environment, but had a lot of negatives to business, individuals, and the like. I welcome this spring cleaning from Administrator Zeldin. I have publicly supported this, and he has said, and you can be rest assured, if I see anything deviation from this, I'll be the first to speak out about this. But he has said that this kind of deregulatory measure can come without expensing or without expending and ruining the environment, because nature does not have to come before people. People can be positive on the landscape. People have to be positive on the landscape. So admonishing human involvement in the environment is not a way to achieve environmental progress. Quite the opposite, actually. And the people who claim and propagate that they're putting nature first by discouraging access on public lands, by discouraging energy infrastructure projects, being a roadblock to permitting reform, sensible permitting reform, they're not really considerate of the environment. They just have a selfish view that they're better and they know more better than conservationists. We do not have to pick and choose between human progress and protecting the environment. And I wholeheartedly agree with Administrator Zeldin in saying that deregulation will not lead to decimation of the environment. If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.